This is a burner account. Tried posting on Pro, but my burner act doesn't have enough karma. Names and places have been changed to protect the innocent and the not so innocent. Some years ago I started working for a heavy industrial manufacturing company. I lucked out and got a great supervisor for a boss. The work was hard, working 12-hour days for 13 days in a row, and then a Sunday off, then back for another 13 days. I was young and didn't mind. It helped my wife and I save up for a house. After about 6 months, Joe noticed I was picking up on the work pretty fast and promoted me to a group leader position. This came with a raise and increased responsibility that most other workers didn't want. Joe would put me in troubled groups in his department and I would work on general improvements and figuring out the issues. This was a union shop and the mentality was to just put in your hours. Don't work harder or smarter, just do your time and don't kill the job was the unspoken motto. After a few years, Joe was promoted a manager and he transferred me with him to his departments. While I wasn't a supervisor yet, I was the supervisor in all but name. The supervisors loved it because they never had to leave the office, and I liked it because it was a good learning experience. I made a good reputation and got a lot of respect from workers and from management. Eventually, Joe's areas were doing so well he was promoted to plant manager. As before, he wanted to promote me with him, this time to a supervisor spot. We talked in length because the only supervisor spot open was working for Karen. Karen was female, a minority, and a member of the LGBTQ community. She was the poster child on the company website of the inclusiveness in the workplace. Literally, her face was the one they used. She was also a freshly minted manager and Joe was not confident in her abilities, but me being the plucky go-getter with a can-do attitude decided to take the position. I had to interview with Karen and got to meet some of her supervisors. They were very quiet and reserved. Once I was promoted, I worked in tandem with another supervisor, Chris. Chris was young, had one small child, and his wife was pregnant and a stay-at-home mom. During the first week, everything was going well. I was learning all the employees, getting to know the process, and getting my feeling for the area. During the second week, Chris's wife went into labor and she had a hard time. Chris went on paternity leave for 6 weeks and I was tossed into the deep end in charge of the whole area solo. With 60 employees, I was barely treading water, but I was doing my best. When I would ask Karen for guidance or assistance, she would scoff like it was beneath her and tell me, if I have to do your job, then I don't need you. So I gritted my teeth and worked my tail off. My wife got me a smartwatch and I was averaging 25,000 steps a day trying to keep everything running. We were holding our own and employees all did what they could to help, as the situation was not ideal for everyone. A few weeks and I was reviewing some quality documents and I noticed that one of the quality gates was not being followed. I emailed the info to the quality engineers and they lost their minds. This was a 4-hour operation on a 20-hour part that we were skipping entirely. Turns out one of the reasons Karen got promoted was because she was running her department so efficiently. Then it came to light that she made the decision to skip this quality process, saving that 20% of time. Except the engineers never signed off on this and it caused massive damage control. The process had to be reinstated and the parts that were never checked had to have warranty extensions. This caused the company to have egg on their face and Karen to look bad. During this time, Karen also became more vindictive. She would openly tell people she would never be fired and could do what she wanted. She would walk the departments, and if she didn't like someone, she would make the supervisors write them up by the end of the day. She wanted us to find a reason, and if we didn't, she would take it out on the supervisors. For example, forcing the supervisors to stay late to do inventory or something else menial just because she could. She would not let the supervisors make any decisions until she approved, so something like overtime had to wait for her approval, and she would not respond until the end of the day, causing the departments to scramble. Then if there weren't enough overtime employees to do the work, she would blame it on the supervisors. While the supervisors knew this wasn't right, we all needed our job and tried to do the best we could for Karen and the employees. We were mainly rodeo clowns to Karen being the bull. The first day Chris was back, him and I were both pulled into Karen's office. She started berating me on how poor of a job I was doing, making her look bad, and how I never came to her for help. This made me speechless because of the previous comments she made and the fact that supervisor work was beneath her. After the meeting I was still a bit stunned, but I put it together that she was about to railroad me out of the company, and this was the first step. I called Joe and asked for a meeting that same day. When I got together with Joe, I started telling him about the things that were going on that he had no idea, the harassment, the abuse, the vindictive nature. Ironically, while I was speaking with him, another supervisor called him to complain about Karen as well with the same grievances. Joe was stunned and said he would speak with Karen, but he gave me carte blanche on any open spot in the company starting next day. He really didn't want to lose me. I did a lateral transfer to a different department doing engineering, IT work, and I thought that was the end of it. A few weeks later I was leaving work and Karen mentioned that I never turned in my laptop and phoned to her. I told her I didn't know I had to, but that I could give it to her tomorrow. She smirked and said she would get it back soon enough. I didn't think too much of it at the time. After about 6 months I had my review with my new boss Jake. The review went great. He was very happy with my work and was a bit surprised at how fast I picked up things. At the end of the meeting Jake mentioned offhand how Karen tried to intervene in the review and get me fired, but Joe stepped in and squashed it. Okay Karen, now you pissed me off. After I left Karen's department, the turnover rate went through the roof. The supervisors were quitting at a rate of 1 every 3 months. Keep in mind that this is a legacy company that had multi-generations working. Fathers, mothers, sons, entire families. Some areas had 3 generations working side by side, and yet Karen was rolling over employees and supervisors like a steamroller. Working for her became the kiss of death. I casually mentioned to Joe about the turnover and he told me he couldn't figure out what was going on. People were quitting without notice and no one was doing exit interviews. I told Joe that Karen was writing people up to force them out. When they would hand her the resignation letter or 2 weeks notice, she would tell them to leave immediately and throw away the letter. Then she would tell HR that the person quit on the spot and that was the end of it. Joe told me that because of who she was and how high she was, the company wouldn't do anything to her until they had an airtight case. So went to work. I took the supervisors working for Karen out drinking after work a few times a week and made sure I had my hand on the pulse. If someone was quitting, I made sure they emailed their letter of resignation to Karen and CC'd Joe and HR, stayed for their exit interview, and that they called the company integrity hotline for good measure. Things were progressing well and I had all the supervisors on board except Chris. Chris really needed the job and Karen was not writing him up. Through a stroke of luck I found out Karen was lowballing his raises as a cost-saving measure. That's why she was not harassing him. When I told Chris, he was furious and wanted to quit on the spot. I encouraged him to speak with Joe before he leaves. Joe and Chris had a very productive meeting and Chris decided to stay. Now all the supervisors were on board. Joe brought in an HR bigwig from the headquarters in Kansas, and over the course of a week each supervisor was sent in for an interview discreetly without Karen knowing. By the time the interviews were over they had emails, texts, eyewitnesses, and a mountain of evidence. This next part I heard from other people, HR, Joe, etc. Despite everything, the company wanted to keep this quiet, so they brought in Karen and said they no longer needed her and offered a very generous severance package. Karen, being Karen, lost it on the HR people. She threatened to sue for discrimination and even called a lawyer. That's when the company pulled out the stack of evidence and rescinded the severance offer. After a few months, Karen found a new job as a plant manager in a different factory, and I found out where. I casually mentioned to the union reps at my factory where Karen was working and suggested that maybe they should give the union at the other factory a call. She was fired within 3 months for employee harassment. Last I heard, she had to sell her house and move out of state to find a job. Story 2. Bit of background. I'm 36M as of now. The characters have been a bit altered by their names. Rebecca, James, Saladin, Lisa. So Rebecca and I were what you call college sweethearts. We survived college and the hardships of life. Got married in our early 20s. Ever since we got married, things were rocky. Not from the start, but situation-wise. I was in medical while she was an accounting major. There were things that was okay with me but was not with her. Despite being married, she acted like she was a free bird. It's a good thing, but there was marital neglect from her side. 2016, she joins James' company as an accountant because it pays well. I was happy because hey, he's a buddy of mine. Slowly she started to complain about things that were in place. She didn't like where we lived, had problems with everything I did. She did not like the food she used to our fights, intensified by a margin where she would call me names. I'm good for nothing. She earned more than me. Drastic turn was here that Rebecca and James were hanging out with our set of mutual friends. I got the word of it and it seemed off. I confronted both of them, to which they both said it was a sudden plan and I was out in field. Coincidentally, it happened on the same day I was out of city. They might have planned it beforehand, which I'm not sure of. 2017, the year my marriage blew up. So I was sure there was something because my bedroom became a fucking dead one. I was increasingly paranoid, and whenever I tried to address things I was turned down. Now I'm not a saint. I constantly yelled at her to tell me what was going on because there was just something off. Your favorite person rarely talks or does stuff with you and they claim it's nothing. Does this sounds okay? It was also the year we were at our peak financially because our debts were paid off. My friends and I decided to open up a medical shop that provided medicine shop as a side venture. So one of the friends was Saladin. He proposed that we celebrate it at a pub. When we go there, I notice a girl that looks exactly like Rebecca. She was dancing with another man and it was quite dark. I get a closer look, lo and behold, it's Rebecca and James dancing hand to hand. I wasn't much bothered about it because hey, they're friends. I was here with my colleagues and she was there with her. But it was bothering me. I decided to send her a text asking where was she. She told me she was already at home. Now that was a red flag. I told her to stop lying because she wasn't. I could clearly see her that she was getting paranoid and told me she was on her way. She left the pub afterwards. That night I asked her about James. The look she gave me was as if she saw a ghost because she was not expecting that question. That look was what that told me something was definitely up. If you ask her so about a friend, they should act normally, but the way she acted was abnormal. That night itself I snooped her phone. Curiosity was killing me. The password was changed so I couldn't see the phone. The next day, I saw her password and snooped it. There were hundreds of thousands of texts right there. Countless nudes, calling him daddy, degrading comments. My wife and I made a vow to each other that if there was ever anything we needed to explore we would be transparent to each other. She broke that vow too. She confided about him how much thrill she felt that night at pub. I went through everything. What hurt the most was she herself told me if one of us ever got bored of the other or needed to spice things up, we will let each other know. She destroyed everything. I couldn't look at her the way I used to anymore. I cried the night and confronted her stupidly without any evidence the next morning. She yelled at me and stormed out after telling me I was abusive and insane. She told all our friends that I was abusive. That afternoon, they created a messenger group where everyone ganged up to troll me. When she came home that night, she told me she was in love with James and wants a divorce. I told her to talk first, but it turned into her berating me. I yelled at her and she called the cops. I was asked to spend the night elsewhere. I went to my sister's and when I returned the next morning, James' car was here. He spent the night here. There was nothing needed to explain. He was doing it on purpose. Hell, she was doing it on purpose. I went to see a lawyer. As we did not have a prenup, she already filed a complaint about me being abusive. It didn't look good for me. Not one did she try to apologize. Not one did she try to make amends. Our country law doesn't count infidelity as a fault. So even with that she's entitled to half of my everything. But her complaint can sue me up. Few days after that, where I was still living with my sister, I tried contacting Rebecca, but she won't reply to me. Rebecca hit me up telling me we should get divorced. That's it. 12 years of relationship, 4 years of marriage, and she ends it with a text. I was fucking convinced that James was taking my place. She handed me the divorce papers. Everyone from our friend circle was convinced that I was a fucking abuser, and James was her savior. She did the right thing to cheat on me. We were officially divorced during the start of 2018. She was already dating James open during our divorce. He was her life. I lost my job, my house, my reputation in her little affair. I had to change the city to move someplace else to restart again. Saladin helped me massively in that fresh start. He got me a decent paying job that was nowhere like my previous one, but it was better than the rest. We became close buddies while I was working to earn back what I had. Dating life was over for me. I just couldn't trust anyone. It was a complete NC between me and Rebecca. Last I heard was she moved in with James. They were doing great. Revenge part. End of 2020, my life was actually blowing up. COVID helped our cause with broken backs but filled our pockets. Our pharmacy venture turned huge, so I was able to make much money. I met a friend of mine from whom I got a tip that James and Reb were done. James cheated on her and left her. But Reb had a child with James. He was absent since birth, so he did not sign the birth certificate, so Reb is raising that child as a single parent. She tried dating, but she was not over me or James. Part of me was happy with it, but gosh, I really missed her. I sent her an email asking how was she doing. She wasn't expecting to hear from me. We exchanged mails and reconnected. Our first meet was in 2021 after several years. She looked like shit. She gained weight, lost the charm, and looked utterly exhausted all the time. Frankly, just her look made my blood boil and triggered me, but I also want to take my revenge on her. Life had already done that on my part, but I'm an asshole. I wasn't done with her. She told me about James and reopened the earlier wounds. I got my closure, which made me feel a bit better, I guess. She said she was sorry. She wasn't thinking straight what she was doing. James poisoned her mind against me. I told her I will forgive her if she comes clean to everyone and clears my name out. She did that, losing a lot of friends, but she deserved that. My name was clean. She wanted us to date again. I told her I would agree to it, but we needed to date and marry first. Only then I will legally adopt her child. That little guy is adorable and I had taken a liking to him. Here is the truth, I was already seeing someone. Pretty safe to say I was cheating on that woman with Reb. She was a client of mine from a different country. We were in a LDR. Reb and I were living in different cities, so I never moved in with her. But I played it well by saying I need to travel for business. So I was only getting Rebecca's hopes up to crush her like she crushed me. We were getting intimate, but condoms were used. Rebecca felt she found love again. I pushed her to therapy to get her be normal again. Everyone was commenting how she was getting more happier with me. She would praise and then say sorry. Do little things for me that she used to when she was married to me. Trust me when I say I had a lot of emotions attached to this woman. I considered my revenge if it was a good thing to break her heart. She might be traumatized for a lifetime. But she did not think of my heart, and we were married. Why should I think of hers? Her birthday was coming up last year, October. Lockdown was eased up and my someone was in my city. For the birthday gift, I grabbed Rebecca for ring shopping. She picked out her favorite ring that I got it wrapped. She was elated because of that. That night, she came up to me crying that she was sorry for hurting me. She looked genuinely remorseful, but I had no feelings for her except indifference. Lisa was Saladin's cousin. I already told her everything beforehand. She was against my revenge idea, but I managed to convince her somehow. She was uncomfortable with it but understood that I needed to go through it. On Rebecca's birthday, I drove her to our favorite spot when we were married. It's a nature's place. Lisa was already waiting there. I introduced Lisa to Rebecca that Lisa's my GF. Rebecca went white and asked me, what does she mean? What is she then? I introduced her to Lisa as Rebecca, my ex-wife and FWB. There and then, I proposed to Lisa with that ring. Rebecca went man and started yelling, to which I replied, how the F can she expect us to work out when she nuked us? I'm never dating a dirtbag like her again. She asked me again and again if we meant nothing. I told her nope. Sleeping WTH her was compensation for the pain. I got her to clear out the pain she put me through. Lisa was holding me back. She saw Rebecca was hurting. I told Rebecca that she needs to leave. She told everyone that I cheated and I was an asshole. This time, I took it as a pride. Everyone saw the dirt bag she was. She cheated on me and made me pay a high price for a falsified abuse. Now she wants me to raise her kid and date her. The last we connected was in December of last year. She wrote me a letter that how much sorry she is because she can't imagine putting me through the pain that she already put me through. She hoped I live a better life. Last I heard, she was completely uninterested in dating. Looks shit. As of me, I and Lisa stopped dating. There were differences between us. I'd like to add an edit. People who are saying I'm worse than my ex. Can you please, at least for the love of God, point out how am I worse than her? She cheated. I loved her and she fucking cheated on me. She costed me my home, my job, my image, my reputation, my friends. I was an abuser to everyone. I gave her a taste of her own medicine. Now I'm worse than her. I don't want judgment. This is nuclear revenge and I'm sharing my revenge stories. I may emotionally scarred her, but that's what she did to me. While I was earning my bachelor's in chemistry, I worked for the university's hazmat department.